Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. Like many of you, I've been following the daily news reports surrounding this crown virus. Also, like many of you, I found some very weird things surrounding this entire event, not to mention lots of symbolism as well. The whole thing has me wondering, are we witnessing the pale horse riding? So there's a lot to get into, and let's just get started right here. What you're looking at here is evidence of 4 massive plagues that have taken place exactly 100 years apart. In 1720, we had the Great Plague of Marseille. That was the last of the significant European outbreaks of bubonic plague. It lasted for about 2 years and eventually took over 100,000 lives. In 1820, we saw the first cholera pandemic. By 1820, cholera had spread to Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. On the island of Java alone, the outbreak caused the death of over 100,000 people. In 1920, we saw the Spanish flu. This would be the first of 2 pandemics to involve the H1N1 influenza virus. The virus had a massive reach, infecting 500 million people around the world. The death toll worldwide was up to 100 million, making it one of the deadliest in human history. And now, 100 years later, in 2020, of course, we have the coronavirus. And it's important to understand that there have been other outbreaks and plagues in between these 4. It's just interesting that these 4 have lined up every 100 years. And now we have this. Bill Gates predicted the crown virus outbreak, death of 33 million people in 2018. Here's another example of predictive programming surrounding this whole situation. Netflix viewers freaked out as the pandemic documentary happens to drop amid crown virus outbreak. And anyone out there who's ever done any research on Bill Gates should understand by now that ultimately what he's all about is eugenics. And it's his mission, it's his goal to bring that on through vaccines. A few years back, he gave a TED Talk where he explained that vaccines are one of the keys to reducing global population levels. So let's take a look at some other stories surrounding this event. There's a lot of interesting things happening, that's for sure. And it's not slowing down. I mean, this is still a developing story, and there's new things coming out every day. Health experts issued an ominous warning about crown virus pandemic 3 months ago. Here's another example of predictive programming when it comes to this event. A U.S. patent for an attenuated crown virus was filed in 2015 and granted in 2018. There's also a narrative forming that it seems like not enough is being done about this. Many people are theorizing that it seems as if someone out there wants this to be spread. World Health Organization accused of delaying response to crown virus outbreak to appease China. Meanwhile, it spreads to more than 24 countries. Another way to look at all of this is, could it be a page out of The Art of War? Could China have created this superbug and make it appear as if it broke out, at the same time making it seem as if they're trying to clean it up and contain it? They shut down their country, at the same time destroying all dissidents and secretly moving all the chess pieces into place. And then they make sure they do everything possible for the virus to infiltrate every other country in the world. And while all those countries are falling apart, China prepares for total domination through war. It just so happens that everything this pandemic is achieving fits perfectly into the top priorities of the globalist or New World Order agenda. And it's really hard to keep up with the information on this entire situation. How much of it is real, how much of it is hoax, how much of it has been filtered. But according to some doctors and scientists who have been following this, they say conservatively it could kill up to 500 million people, which would go a long way towards accomplishing the globalist goal of depopulation. Something else that's become apparent is that this pandemic is allowing governments to declare medical martial law with gunpoint enforced quarantines, mandatory vaccinations, and government kidnapping of kids from parents who refuse to go along with the medical tyranny. Something else to consider is we could see an economic collapse from the pandemic's effects on the global supply chain. There's also a connection between the PeerBright Institute and 5G. PeerBright is being supported in their vaccine development endeavors by a British company, Innovate UK, who also funds and supports the rollout of 5G. And of course, the same city where this virus originated is also the same city that they rolled out 5G. We also have that connection to PeerBright Institute, Bill Gates, also the connection to the vaccines. The Pentagon has opened 11 quarantine facilities. The Pentagon ordered Northcom to prepare for the pandemic as fears mount that China can't stop it from spreading around the world. So now we have the United States military preparing for pandemic. Just a few days ago, we were told that the virus has now spread to nearly 30 countries. And here's another story about quarantine sites in America. This one's going to take place at a FEMA facility in Alabama. As I mentioned earlier, this is still a developing story, and it's developing quickly. Every day it seems there's something new. We are seeing the creation of the biblical one world government, one world system, one world religion before our very eyes. But to get there, they're going to have to create a lot of fear. There's going to be a lot of events. There is going to be a lot of chaos. So now they're preparing everybody. So now America is being prepared. Director of CDC warns Americans, Wuhan virus is coming, will spread widely, and likely last beyond 2020. Obviously, it's important we take a look at China. And let's go back to square one being China's social credit system that was created by Google and Facebook. China has been and is the model for the New World Order beast system. China always has been and certainly is now the model for what the globalists want America and the rest of the world to look like. China is the testing ground for much of the globalist technology, surveillance, and social engineering. We have American companies that have helped to create a massive digital surveillance state in China. They're now using artificial intelligence along with the surveillance state that's been installed in the country to read the faces of the people while they're in public. This way they can determine who the person is, and through the social credit system they already have all of the information on that individual they will ever need. And we can see how much of this is already taking place in America. So now we're getting into what I believe is the ultimate end game. It's hard to tell what the numbers really are of people infected and those dying. It's also hard to tell right now how far this is spread. Again, every day there's new information, and it's constantly conflicting with what we've already been told. When looking into biblical end times theology, many people wonder, how could it be that millions of people around the world are going to accept this mark, this mark of the beast? Well, I'm not saying that this right here is the answer, but it could certainly be one of them. If a country goes into medical martial law, this right here could very well be the answer. In this case, the government, and then soon governments, will have the perfect excuse to start tagging and monitoring their citizens. Under this scare of the coronavirus, we could easily see people's civil liberties falling away. So now we have this: government unveils new electronic tags for people under Wuhan home quarantine. And it certainly wouldn't be much of a leap to go from these tags around your wrist to something that's actually inserted in you or on you.
A pinch of the skin, and in a matter of seconds, the chip is inserted. The transformation is complete.
Not to worry, in America, Apple has already been working on the exact same thing for us. This is from a couple years ago, Apple developing custom health information tracking chips. And speaking of Apple, that brings us into another situation that's developing surrounding the crown virus. Apple will miss revenue forecasts as the virus impacts its manufacturing and sales. Procter & Gamble, which is a massive corporation, says that 17,600 products could be affected by the virus in China, highlighting the supply chain risk. Every day now, there's new stories coming out about the global risk, the global impact, how this is going to affect economies and trade. This story just came out over the last few days. The virus is considered a threat to the global drug supply. The world's pharmaceutical supply chain is in danger as the virus spreads across China and jeopardizes travel and trade. As I mentioned earlier, this entire scenario is a perfect fit for globalist takeover. This is a perfect fit for their agenda. It's got everything. It's got eugenics, you're wiping out massive amounts of the human population. It also has the surveillance aspect and the microchipping aspect, keeping track of the citizens. Keeping that in mind, now we see how it's affecting the finances. China is sterilizing cash in an attempt to stop the virus spreading. As you can see, what's developing here, in my opinion, more order out of chaos. Should every country be sterilizing their cash? It might make it easier if we just went to a digital currency. And the digital currency, of course, is the next step into the microchip. Everybody's money will be digital, and you can access it through your chips. Here's another story that just came out over the last few days. MasterCard wants to identify you by your heartbeat and your veins. And once again, you see where this is going, right? I've no doubt their argument would be that they'll be able to monitor your symptoms with the chip much more closely. And we also have this story here. Bank of America CEO is openly calling for a cashless society. And then we have this story here. Federal Reserve Chairman, United States is working hard on digital currency. This will be global. It's not just going to take place in America. Here's an example. And this story just came out about 3-4 days ago. Do you think the United Kingdom should become a cashless society? Study predicts no cash by 2030. And of course, they have this base covered as well. The blue helmets are coming. World Health Organization Director General tweets, "We are now mobilizing the United Nations." So everything's set into place. Now they even have a military they can use to back up this agenda. For years, people have been screaming about the blue helmets coming, the blue helmets coming, the United Nations is going to take over. This certainly seems like the perfect setup for this scenario to actually take place. And here's a few other events for your consideration that are taking place right now. Have you heard about this massive locust plague? It's invading Africa. They say it was spreading to China and other parts of the Middle East and Asia. We even have news of the plague hitting Pakistan. Pakistan declared a national emergency due to the locust plague blocking out the sun. That's not the first time I've read this. In some of the other locations where they've spotted this plague, they say it's so thick and massive it turns the day to night. These are certainly signs that the white horse is riding, or the pale horse rides. We have all the madness coming out of China, this pandemic, while at the same time we have billions of locusts, a plague of biblical proportions covering parts of the earth. I've always been a person that connects the dots, and I also notice trends, and I'll always find a way these trends seem to connect with one another. So we've already discussed some of these signs of the biblical end times. What are we missing? The guillotines. The Bible was written thousands of years ago, but in this Bible it warns us of a time that's coming, where everyone on the planet will be forced, coerced, to take a mark of the beast. And if you don't take this mark, you will be beheaded. How are they going to behead millions of people? Because millions of people are not going to take this mark, whatever it may be. So I've noticed a trend over the last few months, a lot of talk of guillotines. Check this one out here. A Democrat Senate candidate unveiled guillotine as their new campaign logo. And let's take a look at why. She claims her new logo is the guillotine because it symbolizes the very serious problems with our government that must be addressed, quote, before a violent uprising becomes inevitable, unquote. She describes herself as a non-binary socialist, and she said the execution apparatus was the perfect symbol to represent her party's upcoming war with the Republicans and the wealthy. I would add, by extension, this is an upcoming war with Christians. I see all things in the spiritual. It's just the way I connect things. And I see stories like this as evidence of the Antichrist spirit manifesting through people. We had this story not long ago. French protesters brandished a massive guillotine in a threat to Macron on the Day of Rage riots. You may have seen the recent expose by Project Veritas where they spoke with a South Carolina field organizer for Bernie Sanders. And on several occasions, this man mentioned guillotining the rich. He too is signaling the same thing the Democratic senator was signaling, an upcoming war, right? With they say the Republicans and conservatives, but again, I'll tell you by extension, that's going to be the Christians. We're just seeing the beginnings of this. We're seeing how all this is coming together and shaping up. It's the spirit, the Antichrist spirit. We see this manifesting. It's a hive mind, a satanic hive mind that we're up against. Here's another example. This story just came out in the news a few weeks ago. Puerto Rican protesters bring a guillotine to the governor's mansion. And here's an image of that actual guillotine. And of course, here on the channel, we focus a lot on the symbols. So I find it very interesting that this particular guillotine that they took to the governor's mansion has an upside-down star, or a star with the tip pointed downwards. This is a pentagram. This is the Baphomet. And what does the Bible tell us about the fully matured beast system? The people who do not want to take the mark or be a part of that system will have their heads taken off. So of course I'm going to find a pentagram on this guillotine. I'm not saying someone put it there on purpose for that reason. I believe these types of things work through the spiritual. They work through people without them even realizing it. Here's something else I wanted to share with you, and this footage just came out over the last 24 hours. What you're looking at is a supermarket in Italy. This isn't in China, this is in Italy. The crown virus is spread to Italy now, and people are starting to freak out. We've seen this before, right? We've all seen this imagery. We've all seen this scene before many times. Tons of movies and TV shows. We've been inundated, mind-controlled with predictive programming for the end times now for decades. And it's really increased, hasn't it? Perhaps for a time such as this. But just think of all the movies and TV shows you've seen about the end of the world, and this is one of those sequences. People in the supermarket, they can't find any food. But please, just keep in mind to not be in fear. Don't live in fear of all this. Don't be afraid of what's coming. I believe this is a time where we really, really need to turn to our Heavenly Father. It seems we're witnessing the perfect storm. And will this be the event that ultimately ushers in that final one-world leader? The man of sin, the son of perdition. We'll have to wait and see.